Welcome back to my very cold garage. Last time we made soft slab sculptures. Today we're going to be doing hard slab sculptures. Now both of those are ideal for geometric forms, and the difference being that a soft slab is when you manipulate the slab, you round it in some way while it's still soft, hence the name. Hard slab means that you're going to be making the shapes ahead of time, allowing them to firm up enough that they can hold their own weight, and then forming them together. So just to go back a little bit, this was the dice tower that I made, and it hasn't been fired yet. And this is one that I made that has been fired and glazed. And to show you how that works, here's my D&D dice. If you drop them in the top, cling, clang, cling, come down to the bottom. So I was looking at these and I thought, well, that's a really cool form there. That's, you know, I don't know what it is. It's made out of, it's got 20 sides. Each of them are equilateral triangles. And I thought that's kind of similar to something I made before. Let me grab this. This is a little jar that I, excuse me, little jar that I made that has 12 sides, and each side is a pentagon. So I thought, well, how's that fit? Doesn't quite fit. Is it that way? There it is. Okay. No, it's not that way. If you're going to just spend the whole video trying to find the way the jar lid fits back on. There we go. So I thought it'd be really fun to make a 7 dice set bigger out of clay, because why not? And that's just one example of forms that you could make using this technique. Any flat-edged geometric form works with this. I'll put some examples of other works that I've done using this technique on right now. Okay, so got a slightly different setup here. Hopefully everything is in view and stays in view. I really can't tell. But anyway, I looked up some of these forms for the dice, and the 20-sided one is a icosahedron, I guess. 12-sided one, dodecahedron. The 10-sided ones, these are interesting because they're not, where's my 10-sided? There it is. They're not platonic solids like the others are. They are pentagonal trapezohedron. I know I'm not pronouncing these right. 8-sided one's an octahedron. That one's a little bit easier. 6-sided one is a cube. I don't know how to pronounce that. Oh, cube, of course. Then 4-sided one's a tetrahedron. So I'm going to start here and go backwards. And I also found these online, and these are just paper folding templates. So this one has 6 squares, and if you folded and glued these, you would make a 6-sided cube. I'm not going to cut out this shape out of clay and then try to fold the clay. That would be ridiculous. I'm going to cut out one of these squares and use it as a template to make 6 square slabs. And after I make the slabs, I'm going to let them sit for a while and firm up a bit, and then slip and score and join them together. So I'm going to start with a 20-sided one because that one looks like the hardest. And is that it? No, that's the 12-sided one. It gets even more complex than that. Look at that. Okay. So I'm going to have to make 20 of these triangles. And all right, so I'm not going to make you watch that because, okay, well, I'll just tell you. Same as the soft slab, I'm going to flatten the clay by hand as much as possible, roll it with the rolling pin. I'm using these as my thickness guides, just because these are easier to store than those flat pieces of wood. I can keep these over in my tool rack. And then after that, smooth it over on one side with a card, flip it over, smooth it over on the other side with a card, and then trace my shapes and cut. And it's just that simple. All right, so let's switch over to time lapse. All right, now I've got my 20 triangles cut out. If I were smart, I probably would cut a couple extras, but let me turn this off. But you know, I'm living life dangerously, so I'm going to let these sit for a while. Now, while these are firming up, a couple of considerations. First off, you want to be careful not to bend the slab, because if you bend it, you're displacing some particles, and even if you flatten it back out, as it dries, some of those particles are going to reorient back. They call it clay memory. And if it warps, it'll split apart at the seams. So keeping these as flat as possible. After you smooth it down, from that point on, keep them as flat as possible. If I were, you know, going to set these aside for a day to set up, what I might do is just stack them up with newspaper in between, and then slide them into a bag. And the newspaper will absorb enough moisture that by the next day they should be ready to work. Now, another thing to consider, when these go together, they're not going to go at right angles. If I look at my example, it looks like sets of 5 of them will be the first where I start. I'll start with 5 of them and join them to make almost like a bowl kind of form, and then build from there. It'll be tricky because, you know, these slabs have thickness, and if I join them together on the inside edge, there will be a space, a gap in between. I could just fill that gap with a coil and smooth it over. What I find works really well for me, though, is just when I slip and score, just to kind of round out that corner. And then the angle that they're joined isn't as, doesn't have to be as perfect. And the gap in between will be much smaller. So all I have left to do is let those set up for a while. If I'm leaving them out like this, I might even kind of turn them from time to time so that they dry evenly. If the top, you know, small slabs like this aren't as much of an issue, but with big slabs like with that robot one that I did, if the top surface dries before the bottom surface does, the top is going to shrink and it's going to pull that slab upwards. And if that happens enough, it'll actually crack under its own weight. So, you know, probably the #1 challenge with hard slabs is just dealing with warpage. And, you know, so make sure you slip and score really well, because you want that joint to be as strong as possible so it doesn't split. And also making sure you're drying your slabs evenly, either between paper or turning them every once in a while, which is what I'll do. Don't let them dry out too much, obviously, because then you won't be able to join them at all. So I got to keep an eye on these. I'll give them a little while, flip them over, you know, so I'll come back to this one later. I don't know if I'm going to get to the rest of these in this video. That might be too long of a video. This might be an ongoing project for me. But if I only get the D20 done today, I think that I'd be happy with that. Alright, I wanted to show you something before I start assembling this. This is the original paper template I used for that robot truck sculpture. I kept it in case any of the pieces broke, I could remake it, but it's exactly the same process as this simple template, just a whole lot more pieces. You can see this is the chest, and this is part of an arm, even the hand pieces, like a fist. So I kept it more of as a memento, I guess, because that was probably one of the pieces I'm most proud of. One of the most complex things I've done. All right, so I'm going to start assembling these. I'll start out in real time, and then I'll switch to the time lapse for brevity's sake. The biggest mistake people tend to make with this is just to start out too small. They want to do two pieces together. And then, even if you're making a cube and it's a 90-degree angle and it's pretty easy to estimate, it's very weak if it only has two pieces. If you have three pieces, then you get added support, okay? Because they hold each other, and then if I wanted to make the four-sided die, I'd already have, already be on my way. But this is for the 20-sided die, so it's not going to make a triangle like this. And I think the simplest way to do that is to start with 5 of them. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you see in this arrangement they don't reach, but when I bring them together, like that, I start to get a base of the form. So I'm going to start with that. And like I said, I'm going to take these corners off when I'm slipping and scoring. And these are not, too much water. These are not quite leather hard. These are actually about perfect. If they were any harder than this, then I would risk them not joining well. So, just gonna, I'm going to end up having to fill in the gaps on the outside anyway, but right now I'm just kind of loosely placing them together. You can see they're not going to hold up like that. When I made the big sculpture, Opus Prime I call it, when I made that, I actually cut all the edges at 45-degree angles. I have a special tool I rigged up to cut a 45-degree angle along the edge to join together without a gap. But even then, some of them, I would go ahead and put a coil of clay on the inside seam just to hold it extra firmly. All right. So now I'm going to make sure that these are nice and smooshed together. And you see those gaps that I was talking about. If I can just smoosh it, that would be even better. Yeah, I think I can. I don't want to round it out too much because then you lose that cool faceted look. But the more surface area I have in this joint, the better. All right. So you can see how it's starting to come together. And if I look at my 20-sided die, I'll get an idea of where the next triangles go. Actually, if these were a little bit harder, I think they would remain more flat. I think they're almost too wet. It's hard to find that perfect balance, but it's all right. It'll work. So I don't want these rounding or bulging in any way. I want it to be faceted like that. And if I'm concerned at all about the strength of the joints there, I can always make a little coil of clay. Set a little coil of clay. There we go. And stuff that into the seams to further strengthen them. course, I'll smooth over these, but this is just to do it quickly. So that added clay there will definitely strengthen and hold that together. Because if it's gonna break, if it's gonna warp, those are going to be the areas where they're going to break. And further on, when the form gets more enclosed, I'm not going to be able to do that. So I want to make sure I do that as much as I can at the beginning. Whew, I am shivering. It is so cold out here. Cannot wait for spring, just so it'll have nice studio temperature. When I go to time lapse, I'll definitely be turning the heater on. That's your behind the scenes secret for today. Okay. So that section is done. So referring back to my original, and I'll go back and actually flatten these more as it's firmer. Maybe, I don't know. Okay, so I've got basically one of these, and then the next is basically like, oversimplified, is basically like a cylinder. So I might need something to hold this for me, and it's going to go one up, one down, one up, etc., all the way around this little bowl. And after that, it's going to be 5 more like this, joined to the top. I'm not going to number these. I thought about it. I kind of wrestled with that idea of, did I want to put numbers on these since I'm making a set of dice? But I really just like the plain look. Plain, the geometric, I'm not using very good words. Kind of the minimalist look, that's what I'm thinking. But I do want to refine these angles and make them flat again. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and switch to time lapse so that you can see more of the project. All right, so that is my D20 done. Got a little bit of refining to do here and there. A couple of the edges went in a little bit. I might need to fill them a little bit. Got a divot here. I don't know where that came from. It's not ready to roll yet. Okay, which means that one's done. 6 more to go, but I won't make you watch those because I think you're ready. You've seen some examples of what can be done. Basic idea, any geometric form with flat facets, flat faces. So, can't wait to see what you come up with. See you next time. Up. He's too nervous because he knows I have Swami. This is what he loves more than anything in the world. But he deserves it because he's a good boy. Bye-bye.